In 17th century New England, belief in the supernatural was often the direct influence of the Protestant faith of the settlers that came here. Unlike the Catholics of Europe, who believed in a place called purgatory, where a soul could be trapped between heaven and hell to atone for its sins, the Puritans instead believed that when a person died, their soul either went directly to heaven or to hell. Therefore, a ghost on the material plane was only the working of the devil himself, oftentimes working through human agents.
In the beginning of the late war between forces loyal to Parliament and those to the late King Charles, a gentleman of that county, being oppressed by the king's party, took arms under the Earl of Essex, and by his valor obtained the command of a lieutenant colonel. But as soon as the heat of war was abated, his ease and preferment led him to a careless and sensual life, insomuch as the godly commanders judged him unfit to continue in England, and thereupon sent him to Ireland, where he grew so vain and notional that he was cashiered from the army. Being then at liberty to sin without restraint, he became an absolute atheist, denying heaven or hell, God or devil, so that at last he became hateful. December of 1655, when Colonel Bowen was away, his wife, a gracious, understanding woman, not easily affrighted, being in bed, was startled to see one in the likeness of her husband, and just in his posture. The figure presented himself to her bedside, proffering to come to bed to her, which she refusing, he gave this answer: "What? Do you refuse the husband of thy bosom?" And after some time, she alleging Christ her husband, it disappeared. Strange, miserable howlings and cries were then heard about the house. His tread, his posture, sighing, humming were frequently heard in the parlor. In the daytime, often the shadow of one walking would appear on the wall. One night was very remarkable. As she was going to bed, she perceived by the impression on the bed as if somebody had been lying there. Opening the bed, she smelt the smell of a carcass somewhere dead. Then, upon the cloth tester, she perceived something rolling from side to side. By and by, being forced out of her bed and not time to dress herself, with such cries and other things almost amazing her, she with two maids got upon their knees by the bedside to pray. Still the spectre assaulted them. Oftentimes she would be lifted a foot or more high from the ground by an unseen hand. Divers assaults would be made by fits. It would come with a cold breath of wind. The candles burned blue and almost out. Horrible screechings, yellings, and roarings within and without the house. Sad smells of brimstone and powder. And this continued from some 9 at night to 3 the next morning, so that the poor gentlewoman and her servants were in a sad case the next morning, smelling of brimstone and powder, and, as I remember, all black with it. This continued so violent that the gentlewoman was fain to withdraw to her mother's house. But her husband's coming home, some 4 months since, we have heard nothing of trouble to the house since. These are the chief things which I dare recommend upon credit, and I could wish that they who question the existency of spirits had been but one night in Llanellan to receive satisfaction to their objections. In the year 1679, the house of William Morse in Newbury, in New England, was strangely disquieted by a demon. On December 3rd, in the night-time, he and his wife heard a noise upon the roof of the house, as if sticks and stones had been thrown against it with great violence, whereupon he rose from his bed, but could see nothing. Locking the doors fast, he returned to bed again. About midnight, they heard a hog making a great noise in the house, so that the man rose again and found a great hog in the house, the door being shut. But upon the opening of the door, it ran out. On December 8th, in the morning, there were 5 great stones and bricks by an invisible hand thrown in at the west end of the house. While the man's wife was making the bedstead was lifted up from the floor, and the bedstaff flung out of the window, and a cat was hurled at her. Also, a long staff danced up and down the chimney, and sundry things were thrown in through the window. People were sometimes barricaded out of doors, when as yet there was nobody to do it. And a chest was removed from place to place with no hand touching it. But the greatest part of the devil's feats were his mischievous ones, and therein the chief sufferers were William Morse and his wife, and his grandson. One night they could not eat their suppers quietly, but had the ashes on the hearth before their eyes thrown in their victuals, yea, and upon their heads and clothes, insomuch as they were forced up into their chamber. And as yet they had no rest there, for one of the man's shoes being left below, it was filled with ashes and coals and thrown up after them. On the next night, as they were going to bed, when the man was in bed, he was beaten with a heavy pair of leather breeches, pulled by the hair of his hair and beard, and pinched and scratched. The boy was violently thrown to and fro. They carried him to the house of a doctor in the town, and there he was free from disturbances. But returning home at night, his former trouble began. All this, while the devil did not appear in any visible shape. Neither were there many words spoken by Satan all this time. Only once, having put out their light, they heard a scraping on the boards, and then a piping and a drumming upon them, which was followed with a voice singing, "Revenge, revenge, sweet is revenge." And they being well terrified with it, called upon God. Suddenly, with a mournful note, there were 6 times over uttered such expressions as, "Alas, alas, me knock no more," and now all ceased. The true reason of these strange disturbances is as yet not known, though some did suspect Morse's wife to be guilty of witchcraft. One of the neighbors took apples which were brought out of that house and put them into her fire, upon which they say their houses were much disturbed. Another of the neighbors caused a horseshoe to be nailed before the doors, and as long as it remained so, they could not persuade her to go into the house. But when the horseshoe was gone, she presently visited them. Others were apt to think that a sailor, by some suspected to be a conjurer, set the devil to work thus against the Morse's family. Or it may be some other thing as yet kept hidden by the secrets of Providence.